What fun stuff do I get out of the box with Tanium? Welcome back to Tanium Tech Talks. I'm your host, Ashley McGlone. When I saw the core Tanium platform almost 8 years ago, I thought it had to be science fiction. I mean, those real-time interact queries just blew my mind, getting all those that like split second now those results from thousands of machines, and it's just fun to watch when people see that for the first time, and that experience never gets old. And since then we've built many powerful use cases on top of that architecture, and we talk about those routinely on the show. And today I want to revisit the content that every customer gets out of the box with Tanium, those core content sensors and packages. And I remember when I first started with a company, one of my mentors would ask these interact queries with these clever sensor names that I'd never heard of, but they were there all along. He said in his spare time, he'll just go cruise through the sensor list to see what's there. And so the main thing I want you to take away from today's show is, if you ever think to yourself, hey, I wish there was a Tanium sensor for X, whatever it is you need in that moment, there's a good chance there probably is a sensor for that. So before you go write your own new custom sensor, just try that Tanium Ask question bar, the question builder, or just browse the console sensors list. You might find what you need. And so today I've invited a specially qualified guest to give us a tour of this core content. Bruce, welcome for your first time on the show. Please introduce yourself for our audience.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, I'm Bruce Langworthy. I'm a product manager here at Tanium, and I manage our core content as well as help deliver our endpoint tooling for the endpoints to use.
So, Bruce, you had an interesting personal achievement recently. I think it would be inspiring for our audience to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. So I have been basically struggling with my weight for my entire life, and about a year and a half ago now, had switched to what's called a carnivore diet, where I am eating like basically meat and not plants and stuff like that, and have lost a significant amount of weight, and uh, basically achieved a milestone of losing half my body weight. I now weigh actually less than half of what I used to.
Wow. You've lost, you're half the man you used to be. That's
Yes.
amazing. Wow. And I would love to spend the whole show talking about that. And maybe in the show notes below, we can put a link to, I know you've got a Twitter account or X now that you're journaling some of that, but looking at what's amazing in Tanium today, tell us how you got started working with core content at Tanium.
Well, so I actually, before I joined Tanium, was working at someone who became a Tanium customer. And I had actually just spent, I don't know how many weeks writing some PowerShell scripts to figure out across my domain how much free space I had on my endpoints so that I could patch them. And we saw then a demo of Tanium at the time. This is many years ago now. And I saw the core content, and I saw things like, the disk free space that I can check across my environment. Now, I had just spent weeks creating a sensor to do this across multiple AD domains and getting it to work. And the core content gives us the ability to do quite a bit right out of the box. And I think sometimes people can forget to consider that. So I wanted to come and talk about it.
Yeah, it's almost like it's hiding in plain sight. There's so many things. I mean, everyday IT challenges, security, ops risk, depending on no matter what you're doing in Tanium, there's a lot of content there out of the box. And so that's why this is such an important topic, really, because everybody has it. So you mentioned disk space as a great place to start. I think that's where a lot of people start. What are some of your other favorite sensors to work with?
Another one of the ones that I like that we actually recently improved. We have a number of sensors that report different details about the BIOS on machines that are useful in different types of like threat scenarios. And we recently created a bias detail sensor, which combines these all into one common form where we can collect information about what bias versions and things like that. This basically tells me not only like the manufacturer, but like I can tell which ones are Hyper-V versus a physical machine and the versions, things like that. Let's see, what would another one that is near and dear to our hearts is the BitLocker detail sensor, which will give me information about whether or not BitLocker is enabled. In this case, it's my lab, so it's not. If it was a normal deployment, I would obviously want to have BitLocker enabled so that my assets are protected.
Isn't there also an encryption sensor, like disk encryption, that goes cross-platform with Windows and Mac?
That's a great question and a great segue to how do we see what's included with core content. So if I go over to content sets, we have a core content set that contains all of the sensors and packages that we provide as part of the core platform. And so you can come in here and look at the different sensors that we have here. We have content for querying different AD attributes or application crashes, information about the battery in your laptop. And so I think I found it really helpful when I first started at Tanium. There's, as you can see, there's 295 different sensors that are provided as part of core content today. Also down below, there are a whole bunch of different packages that can do things like reboot endpoints or apply a custom tag to an endpoint so that you can look for that tag later when you're building computer groups. And so really just trying to make sure that we provide a great common experience to start with. So let me see, you asked about encryption. So let me go look.
Yeah, and we can filter there, right? In the filter in the list, we've got lots of ways. And so this is there. Hey, there we go. Storage encryption status. Maybe that's it.
Let me try that.
Yeah, let's go try. Yeah, there it is. So I'm, hey, what if we just throw in operating system next to that?
Oh, good crash. Oh, not, I don't mean to yell.
Somebody hit your caps lock.
Oh, yeah, there's my Mac. It's now saying that it's encrypted.
Yeah. So a cross-platform encryption status for disk. That's fantastic. Curious, because I want people to understand as well that these sensors out of the box are cross-platform. So, like free disk space will run on any platform machine that's supported with the client, right? So some of those core content sensors, obviously BitLocker doesn't exist on a Mac, but FileVault does. That's why we want to look at that encryption sensor. Yeah, what are some others? Because I know you work in this space all the time. What are some other examples of cross-platform sensors that are popular?
As much as possible, want to strive within the core content to provide stuff that is cross-platform already. So, there are certain some exceptions to that where we haven't yet provided parity. Yeah, there are, some cases where, like a good example might be we have long had content for Microsoft Defender for Endpoint on Windows. We're adding content for supporting Defender on like Mac and Linux. And so there, previously wasn't any need because that didn't exist, but now we're looking at providing parity there. I've switched to a different environment where we have some cloud, and so we can do like get cloud tags, and you can look for like if there was only a specific tag that you wanted to return, you could list that there. In my particular case, I want to see what are all of the tags. Yeah, this will tell me different tags that I've applied to the machines, and we have. If I switch back to look at what's in the content set, we have like the provider or the public IP, which, like the region or the type or the zone, things like that. There's quite a bit that we can pull back from those endpoints. Instance provider. And so like this tells me where all these different, a lot of these are not in the cloud. So we only have a few that are in the cloud, but you see you have some in Amazon, some in Azure, and there are others that appear to just actually be not visible today.
That's fantastic for taking inventory. Yeah. And it's fun to see that works across cloud platforms, just like a lot of our sensors are cross-platform or Windows, Mac, and Linux. These are cross cloud platforms. And it reminds me of a recent episode I did. One of our guests on the show said there was this is cloud and is virtual combined into a computer group for something they were targeting. So I could automatically then know, okay, is this a VM? Yes. And then is it in the cloud or is it on prem? And they were able to very quickly target just the cloud VMs, which was fantastic. That's a good segue right there because I wanted you to talk for just a minute about, a lot of people might think, well, those core content sensors, those were written 10 years ago when they invented Tanium. And what's the update process like and the review process on content?
We are currently aiming for a quarterly release of the core content. So, we're trying to go through and look for opportunities either to optimize the 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 workflows that we're providing, or part of the core content is also the definition of our computer groups. So, like we just added a new computer group definition for Rel 10, which has just come out of beta, so that people can, specifically target those types of endpoints as they're doing targeting for like a software deployment or something like that.
So earlier we looked at the content set view. How about we jump into the sensors view and their just administration and sensors? Because we saw 295 sensors, I believe, in the core content. But here, just again, depending on what modules you have, there's 1,100 sensors here. So much to play with. Could you walk us through, like, looking at the source code of a sensor?
Sure. Let me pick a particular one that is near and dear to my heart. So this particular sensor looks for disk failure prediction in physical machines, as reported by the smart sensor. You have the ability to come in here and you can see how the columns are defined, and you actually have the ability to see how we are collecting this data on the endpoint. And so if you were, let's say maybe more one of the advanced users that is looking at creating your own custom content, and maybe if you wanted some additional data here, you'd make a copy of this sensor and make some changes to it if you wanted to. So this is a Windows only sensor, and you would see as an example, on these other platforms, it'll return this string that we see when we look at it in console, as opposed to like, just an error message or something like that. All right, so another example would be like if I use the wireless network detail sensor, I can actually look at that in the sensor view and see how that's defined and what columns it's going to return. And then down below, I can see the actual code that's going to execute on the endpoint to collect this data. And it's like this is also able to collect data on Mac. I can switch to the code that runs on the Mac and look at that as well. And if you were one of our more advanced users that might want to have some customized content, then you could certainly make a copy of one of these if you wanted to add some additional detail to it to have your own copy of the sensor that reports it in a custom way.
And let's tell you what, if you scroll up to the very top of the screen, I want people to see that there's an edit mode here. And I want you to warn our watchers why you should not edit core content sensors.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to give that warning. So you would not want to typically ever edit one of the sensors or packages that we provide out of Tanium, because when we update our content, we will overwrite the sensors and packages that are shipped as part of like the core content in our solutions. So if you did have a need to modify one of the sensors that we provide, what we would recommend would be to make a copy of that sensor, and then we would usually, as a best practice, like prefix that with either the username or the company name, so it's easy to differentiate that between what we've provided and what might be custom.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation that you could copy it. And then, if we go back to the sensors list, is there just a clone feature right here if we check the box?
There sure is. If you check that, you can say clone, and then you can give it, so I could say Bruce's wireless network details. Let me just drop down here and save this. This is my lab. So now if I search on Bruce, I see Bruce's wireless network details. And so I could now ask the question, get Bruce's wireless network details in the question bar and get back, presumably my customized version of that sensor.
Those naming conventions are really helpful. We always recommend, pick three uppercase letters to put at the beginning, whatever your naming convention is, so that when you're sorting that list of sensors, you know what you've built or customized. And obviously, if we update that core content sensor, your customized version is not going to get updated. So, just something to be aware of there going forward as well.
Good point.
So, core content includes the content sets that we looked at and the sensors. Why don't we flip over to packages now?
Okay.
Because this is other out of the box core content.
Okay. So if I go back to content sets and maybe switch to packages now, just to kind of give an example of the packages that we provide as part of the core platform. So I mentioned add tags. These basically allow us to add a tag, sort of like you would have with a cloud tag for a virtual machine running in cloud. Uh, People will use the tags to apply like a name or data that they will then use to create like a computer group. So they might tag a group of machines with these are super critical production machine, some short version of that, so that they can make a computer group with like their VIP assets or the business critical assets, something like that. Some of our troubleshooting packages, we have packages that allow us to do event tracing on Windows so that we can deploy a package to collect a event tracing log, and then we can capture. Actually, let me split it with packages. Let me just filter it on the content set. Now, some of these, like these first two, those are actually not a package that you would use, and you see that called out. That's part of our endpoint tooling distribution. But like here, I have a package that will allow me to add tags to an endpoint. And then I have a package that allow me to remove tags. We talked earlier about some of our efforts to continuously improve and optimize these. We're working on releasing a new package here that will be a replace tags package that will, instead of having to add a tag and then remove one, you can do both as one step. So
Oh, nice.
kind of a time saver. And then we have, like the event tracing that I mentioned that we would use for like troubleshooting with the support teams. But like packages to add and remove entries from the host file if you needed to change the host file lookup for your network.
That's a big one. I mean, that's one of those sleeper packages that most people aren't aware of. The ability to edit the host file. I mean, we've got this agent out there running as local system, and sometimes you need to make tweaks like that, even in a server environment.
Another one would be like kill application and kill process. If you were doing git running processes and you saw Bill and Ted's process of evil, you would probably want to do a kill on that and stop it from doing evil. That type of thing. And like I mentioned, we have the ability to reboot machines, create, query, delete registry keys. Those come in super handy, and because you could basically look at anything you needed to. You repair the RPM database on Linux. Those can typically cause problems at times that they'll need repairs, and so we want to provide a package to actually just do that easily. I don't know if there are any of these that you want to particularly dig into more. I just kind of giving an overview, but you also have the ability to change service startup types on Windows and adjust the power plan, which is really handy to have. Like our lab and in demo environments, we want to set everything to high performance so it is not going to sleep when we're trying to do a demo.
But I could imagine like some companies that have cost savings, energy efficiency ratings, things like that. They want to just set up a policy maybe that reruns that action on a routine basis to set their machines to a power saver mode or something like that.
Yes. Like a package to uninstall an MSI file if you're trying to uninstall content. And that's actually kind of it for the packages that we have that are part of just the core content solution there. We
And
have,
of
we have far
course,
more sensors than packages.
yeah, a lot more sensors than packages, but we've covered the basics here, particularly in a Windows environment of registry keys, and then there's other file operations, with some of the other content that's installed with some of the other solutions. So, think about the quarantine that you get with threat response. There's a lot of powerful packages out there, but out of the box, you've got a lot to work with. And this just kind of proves our point. Before you go write your own custom sensor or package, make sure that there's not something that already exists for you.
I was guilty of doing that very thing when I first sat down with Tanium and I was still a Tanium customer. Um, I went and wrote a sensor to get the disk free space before I realized that core content provided the sensor to provide the disk free space. So it's definitely worth checking to see if we have something that can get the information that you need before you try to like sit down and write a sensor to do it yourself.
Bruce, we do have other episodes way back in the catalog on creating custom content. I know if you're a cloud customer, there's some training you can take for creating custom content, and we recommend everybody take that if you want to create your own sensors and packages. But I'm curious as we wrap up here, any last thoughts that you want to leave with folks?
Everyone, even if you're not in cloud, check out the class that we have on creating advanced content. That's a free class that you can get access to. And for our cloud customers, doing that class, which I think is only an hour or two, it's a very short class. That will give you the ability to create new sensors in cloud. You need to take that class so that we've kind of given you some best practices. Make sure that we don't do anything too dangerous with sensors. Once we've completed that, you'll be able to create new sensors in a cloud environment. For our customers that are on-prem, you can create new sensors already, but I would still recommend that class because it's got some good content in it.
Yeah, over the years, we've learned some things the hard way when you're doing things at scale with sensors and packages. And it would pay you a lot because we've had customers who had to contact support because they did a bad thing in a sensor or a package and it impacted their environment. And we don't want that to happen to you. So that's why we want you to take that class. That's a really good commercial. Well, Bruce, congratulations on your personal achievement, and thank you for this tour of Tanium custom content. And folks, there's so much more for you to discover. We're literally just scratching the surface. We just saw over 1,000 sensors in the console there, and depending on which modules you have installed, right? So go explore those before you go to create your own. Just go see what's there out of the box that you may be able to reuse. And also head over to help.tanium.com, and there you can jump into the little jump menu at the top, go to the Titans community, and tell other people about what's your favorite sensor that or package that you use in Tanium, or discuss custom content there. It's a great place to share your own findings and discover from others what they're using. You may just think about that, that laptop battery example, right? There's a battery recall because somebody's laptop burst into flames. Don't ask me how I know, right? So you can use that kind of stuff for really super practical, simple things. And then we've got other episodes on reporting and dashboards, and you can get those enrolled to collect over time. So there's all the capabilities of reporting that you can leverage in the Tanium platform once you get your favorite sensors identified. So that wraps up this episode of Tanium Tech Talks. Until next time, go Tanium.